I'd like to bring this meeting to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amendments to the agenda. I will be amending the agenda to allow our auditor's presentation to happen before the public hearing. So with that, that's the only amendment that I have to the agenda. So it goes to our auditor to do his presentation.
Thank you. My name is Ken Onstad. I'm with the CPA firm of Onstad, Brown & Cyphers. We're out of the Dalles and Hood River. And we recently completed the audit for the year ended June 30, 2010. I believe you all have copies of the audit report. So what I'd like to do is just kind of go over it briefly and explain some of the highlights, and then as we go along, if you have questions, please feel free to interrupt and ask as we go along. I think probably the easiest place to start would be to turn to the index, and I'll explain a little bit about what's contained in the audit report. It's composed of several different sections, and the format of the audit report is, for the most part, prescribed by our professional standards and our professional bodies that dictate how these things will be organized and presented. Under the financial section, we have several different things. We have the audit report itself, the independent auditor's report, and then we have management's discussion and analysis, and then there's a section of the basic financial statements, along with notes to those financial statements. Required supplementary information, which is about halfway down the page, is information that is not part of the basic financial statements, but is required to be presented in this format, which is basically the budget and actual statements for the general fund and the street fund. Most of the other funds, or in fact all of the other funds, the budget and actual are shown down below in other information, other financial information. And the reason for that is because as we go through our audit, we have to classify the funds as either major funds or non-major funds. And there's a certain formula that we go through to do that. And in the basic financial statements, as you'll see as you look at those, the major funds are shown in separate columns by themselves. All of the non-major funds end up being combined as one column in those statements. And then the detail of those non-major funds is included back in the back part of the report under other financial information. And then there are other schedules that we include in that other information. And finally, the government auditing standards, we have to include information because basically this goes back to your sewer bond debt that requires this to be presented in accordance with government auditing standards. And then the last part of the report is the audit comments and disclosures required by state regulations, and these are things that the state of Oregon requires to be presented and for us to audit. The last thing in your booklet there, which isn't actually a part of the audit report itself, is the letter to management. And that's where we present any things that suggestions and comments that we have concerning things that we encountered during the course of the audit. Now, if you turn to page 1 and 2 is the independent auditor's report. The paragraph 1 explains that the financial statements, these financial statements are your financial statements, and they are the responsibility of the city's management. And our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements to indicate whether we believe that they're fairly stated or not. The second paragraph kind of goes through that we believe, or that these, our audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. And then the third paragraph is the opinion paragraph, and this is where we give our opinion that we do believe that these financial statements are presented in all material respects fairly. And that's what we call a clean opinion or an unmodified opinion, and so that's what you want. That's basically the best you can get. So that is what you're seeking to achieve. And then the last couple of paragraphs kind of indicates what our procedures and responsibility is for the miscellaneous other financial information. Page 3 through 8 is management's discussion and analysis, which is kind of a capsule of the report, which is prepared by management of the city. It's just kind of a summarized information. Pages 9 through 28 are the basic financial statements themselves. And these, on page 9, you'll see that there are two columns in the statement of net assets for governmental activities and business type activities. The city has several business type enterprises, the utility funds basically, electrical, water, sewer, emergency services, and cable TV, which are classified as business type activities. And then all of the other funds, the general fund and the street fund and the balance of the funds are presented in the government activities column. I'm not going to take your time to go through all of the financial statements. If you have questions about those, then feel free to ask.
Can you answer what the culture and recreation is on page 9? What that is?
Primarily, that's recreation.
Just recreation.
That's what primarily makes up that portion of it. On page 29 to 32, this is the required supplementary information. And as I indicated, this is the budget and actual for the general fund and for the street fund. And as I mentioned, these are the two governmental funds that were considered to be major funds. And then the others are all included in the latter part of the report. If you would jump back to page 53, this is our report in accordance with government auditing standards. Again, this is what was required because you fall under these because of the sewer bond debt. And so we have to put this in every year. And one of the things that we point out on page 55 is a couple of what we call deficiencies. One of the things that we indicate here is functioning work order system. Basically a computerized work order system is something that the city we've talked about in the past, that is not in place. And then the second thing is personnel with the necessary training and expertise to prepare the financial statements, prepare the annual financial report. The city does not have that personnel on staff. And this is something that pretty much most smaller municipalities will have. This is a pretty common thing, and it's probably something that you don't want to get too concerned about because of budget limitations and everything. You're not going to go out and hire a CPA or in-staff cost accountants to do this.
Excuse me,
Yes?
could I ask a question? Could you explain why you think it's important that we use the work order system? Why should we?
The reason for that is to maintain better control over the inventories of the utility systems. In other words, materials are purchased, and at that point they go into inventory, and then as they are put out onto the system, they should be taken out of inventory. And this is presently done manually. And with the functioning work order system, which you have the software for, but it hasn't been implemented yet, that would pretty much happen automatically as it's relieved from that by the work orders as they're prepared by the personnel in those departments.
Thank you.
The page 56 and 57 are, on page 56, there's a list of things under compliance that the state of Oregon requires us to take a look at in our audit, and to indicate whether we find any deficiencies in these areas. On page 57, Oregon budget law, local budget law compliance. We did note a couple of items where there was a deficiency, and going back to page page 32, we indicate that there was an over expenditure of the emergency services fund under the personal services of $1,305. And then on a budgetary basis, there is a fund deficit of $32,000. So those are a couple of issues that the city should address. The second item under internal control, we just kind of summarize what the definitions are for deficiencies and what a significant deficiency is. And so that is the information on the Oregon compliance. Going back to the management letter, which should be the last thing in your report. During this audit, we didn't really come up with anything new that hasn't been addressed in previous years. And what I've listed here on the second page are the comments and recommendations, and these were basically comments that have been made in last year and sometimes going back beyond that, and what the current status of those items are. Under ambulance billings, we did find that there were several months the ambulance billings were not billed out on a timely basis. And this is something that has been pointed out in the past and continues to be an area of concern. And the reason for that is, especially with things like ambulance billings, a lot of times the older they get without being billed, the less likely they are to be collected, a lot of them. And so that's something that we feel should be addressed. Last year we commented about approval of timesheets. We suggested that each of the department heads' time cards be approved by the city administrator, and that was that recommendation was implemented during this last year. We had commented in prior years about the recommendation for using an electronic system for recording cash receipts out at the front desk. And process of implementing this with the new software that you've recently purchased. So hopefully in this coming year that will be implemented. And then the utility work order system, again, that's something that we've suggested for several years, and hopefully with the implementation of the new software system, that also will be implemented. The final item, last year we commented on made the recommendation that the transient room tax be audited on a more or less a random basis. And city staff is in the process of auditing various of the entities involved, and so we feel comfortable with this recommendation has been implemented and will continue to be addressed by the city. And with that, if there are any questions? Yes, sir.
Well, when you mentioned that there's nothing, from the deficiency perspective, there's nothing that hasn't been an issue in the past. You mentioned the budget law non-compliance issue, and I'm wondering if that also falls under your statement about nothing new.
That's a fairly common comment with many audits, that you end up with one fund or one area in any fund that might be overexpended. And that's something that we've discovered almost every year.
Okay.
And the solution to that really is that along towards the end of the fiscal year, along in May, the idea is to take a look at where each of those categories stands and kind of monitor it during that last month or so of the fiscal year, so that if you see you're getting very close on some areas, that budget transfers can be made, and that's something that the city council can do with a resolution by transferring money from one category where you're underexpended into one where you might be overexpended, and that solves that issue.
Okay, and then sort of as a follow-up to that, in the scope of the audit, did you see the connection between ambulance billings not being submitted on a timely basis and the budget law non-compliance issue with emergency services? Is there a connection there, or is that even outside the scope of your audit?
There's kind of an indirect connection. I mean, you're budgeting expenditures for the year, and this one category was overexpended. The billings deals more with the revenue side of the issue.
Sure.
So.
But you budget that, that's part of your budget too.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
On page 14, under the assets, you have a less allowance for doubtful accounts. Is there a particular percentage that you use for that formula?
What we try to do is look at the composition of those every year and look at the aging of the accounts and make a determination whether we think that the allowance is adequate or not. So it's I know Mary Ann kind of makes a monthly percentage, and we kind of look at that. Some years we've looked at it and it seems like your allowance was way over what it really needed to be. This year it seemed like it was a little low, and so that percentage kind of fluctuates
Okay. And so,
from year to year.
and this year, do you recall what it was?
No, I didn't feel like it was a real significant issue. What we did is made a proposed audit entry to account for that difference.
Okay, and then on page 22, you have deposits and investments. It's a continuation of a previous thing, but one of the last sentences is the city has not adopted a formal policy for these risks. Is this a common thing for a small community?
Yes.
So this is...
Yeah, basically your investment is in the local government pool, which is very low risk. And,
Yeah,
I mean, if it goes down, then the whole state's gone down
right.
too. And
how long normally would you carry a considerable, a uncollectible debt? How long would you normally carry it on the books?
It varies. I mean, sometimes after a period of time, either you can't find the people or you know that you're never gonna collect it. And at that point, it would be proper to write it off. Other questions?
I got no question.
Go ahead, Tom.
On the work order again, on that, some of the argument on that is we're a small enough system, paperwork is easy to keep up with and to take care of. So what's the issue on that? Is it a thing that's creates a lot more time for you, or creates a lot more, is that what your issue is the amount of time that it takes to do paperwork as opposed to computer?
It does take additional time for us. The other issue is that the computerized system would create better control over the inventory and that. So what you'd be doing is, as those items are taken out of inventory and put into the system or used for repairs, then you should be able to look at your inventory, and if you went down and counted what's in the room downstairs or out in the warehouse, it should come very close. And if it doesn't, then either it's not getting recorded properly, or you know, the possibility is it could be going out the back door. It just creates better control.
So the paperwork, so I assume you go over what we do in the paperwork then?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so from your end of it, then you don't like how it's working for you, it's.
Well, it's just more cumbersome. And probably the biggest issue is it's going to take a significant amount of time to implement, because Tracy and those people are going to have to sit down and enter all these items and create the different jobs and how they would go into the system. So I think that's been the problem in the past, it's just lack of time on their part to enter this. It's not something necessarily that you could just hire somebody to come in and do off the street. But it would create better control, and also in the long run, I think it would save time.
Are you aware of the system that we're now, not just the one here for that, but in general in the city, the computing system we're going to be purchasing?
I haven't seen the system,
Okay,
so.
you don't know. Well, you talked in here on one of the significant deficiencies on the in-house controls as far as, I guess it's on page 55, on the knowledge, the expertise of the people we have in-house. Now, is that expertise something that we can send our people to school with, and is it college classes we need here, or is not?
To me, that's not a critical issue,
Okay.
because it's something that we're required to inform you of.
Okay.
But to my way of thinking, it's not a critical issue, because what it would require is somebody probably with CPA knowledge that knows all of the things that you have to be able to put together a financial report that's in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And that's something that the city of Portland can do, but
Right.
it's really not cost efficient for.
So right now, we bring in somebody else to do those detailed.
That would be the other thing, and maybe down the road sometime it may be a required issue. But what it would require is basically, if you were to implement that, you bring in another CPA that comes in, writes your financial report, and then hands it to the auditor and says, okay, audit this. And to me, that would be a lot of duplication and a lot of expense.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
On page 15, it shows that like 4 out of 5 of our funds are operating at a loss. And it also shows that the electrical fund is operating at a positive. But I'm curious, I know that in the past, it was the electrical department was, South Bank was reflected separately from what happens in Cascade Locks. Is that reflected in here? Any
Now, say that
differently?
last part again.
We have electrical rates for here in town, and then we have some for South Bank. And I
Right.
know that in the past, that there was some way to figure out how much each was making, but I didn't notice that in here.
In the past, you had a separate South Bank fund,
Okay,
which was closed out, I think in 08, 09.
okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. but,
That was a South Bank grant fund.
Grant fund.
Mhm.
And in your books themselves, in here, we've combined it all, both South Bank and the regular electrical fund. But Mary Ann does maintain that separately.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Ken, but in the previous audits, the South Bank is never separated. The
No.
only thing that we separate is in our own monthly financials. It's not separated in
Okay.
here. This is a combined statement of utilities for CL and South Bank.
Okay,
It's only separated in our financials that you get monthly that we discussed
okay.
the
So
last
that I have-
last time we talked.
Okay.
Kevin?
Page 22, under receivables, I was just curious if there's anything on the receivables that stands out to you as being extraordinary or should be of concern to us?
I don't think there was anything that was out of the ordinary. We usually do a kind of a comparison over a historical comparison in our audit procedures and look at, the percentage outstanding and of sales for the year, and there was nothing that really jumped out at us this year.
I have one question. Mine's pretty generic. So an overall evaluation of over the last, say, 3 years, are you seeing a declining rate in what we have for expendable income?
Yes,
And should we be concerned?
yes, I think you should. I think that's probably, we're probably in there with 95% of the rest of the municipal organizations in the state. The one thing I did notice, I think one of you brought up on page page 14, I think it was, 15, is that most of the utility funds did operate at a loss. Now, the one thing that you need to take into account when you're looking at this is up under operating expenses, you see depreciation. And what that is the city maintains a schedule of depreciable assets of the different utilities. And those are written off over a period of years. So these aren't all actual expenditures or cash outlay during this past year. This is over a period of many years.
Right.
And so it's a little different than on a cash basis. But what this tries to do is put it on the same footing as, say, a for-profit business, the grocery store or,
Right.
a commercial utility or whatever, and allocate those on an accrual basis. So,
All right.
but I certainly think it's probably something that you should be looking at in setting rates and so forth.
Thank you.
I have one more question. On pages 46 and 47, you have a category called total non-major proprietary funds. What is that?
That's the, that would be the total of these three funds,
Okay.
television system,
Okay. Okay. Sorry.
cemetery, and water fund. Those are the three non-major
That's
funds.
okay. Sorry.
Does any other council member have a question? Thank you, Ken.
Okay,
Appreciate your time.
and we appreciate the cooperation of all your people. It's very enjoyable to work with your staff. They do. They're very good to work with. We enjoy working with them.
Thank you.
So we appreciate that.
Duly noted. So with that, we will go into public hearing. And I want to remind everyone that during public hearing, that you're only to talk about items that are not on the agenda, and that we are here to listen to your questions tonight. But be reassured that we cannot answer your questions tonight if you ask them at the agenda, at the public hearing. We will take those into consideration, ask and answer them at the next meeting.
I think your comments, you're confusing public hearing with comments.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Public hearing has just to do with declaring the surplus property,
Oh, okay.
property surplus.
Rookie.
But the same thing would be true of public hearing, that it's just, the comments are just
Or
the testimony on this hearing.
Right, okay. Oh, I see, because it's on this hearing. All right, so we're declaring a public surplus to be given to the CCHC in exchange for a 1 acre parcel. It's now open to public comment. Yes?
I'm here my name is Sandra Kelly, I'm a resident of Cascade Lots. I'm here to testify in favor of this exchange. We're receiving a very large piece of property and giving just a little tiny piece to make this a workable proposal for Columbia, for Ruby Mason and her development. And this will make one step towards trying to rectify a very bad situation, and helping Ruby get use of her land. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. Would anybody else in the, Sandra? I mean, Susan.
My name is Ruby Mason. I represent Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation, and I am in favor of declaring the land surplus in the swap. I do understand that there is, in order to be an equitable swap, the properties do have to be or the exchange has to be of somewhat equal value, and the city is also providing under the letter of intent, labor and equipment for the utilities. And I will comment that although the acreage that we're donating to the city is larger, it is harder to develop due to the topography. There's a steep slope, and if we were to try to develop it for housing, it would require substantial fill. And so even though the one parcel that you're giving up and you're getting the bigger one, it's not as big of a disparity as you might think. Just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Ruby. Anyone else have a comment?
Mr. Mayor, a comment from the
Yes.
City Attorney's Office. Attached to the resolution is a proposed agreement that describes the swap. And it's got it's called purchase and sale agreement.
I'm not sure that we have that.
Do you have that?
No.
Okay.
Kathy's gonna have to get a copy.
Well, the resolution refers to an exhibit.
We didn't get that because they said there were issues, this is according to Angela, there were
Right.
issues with the agreement. So
Right.
that never came through.
Okay, so let me describe that.
Can we get copies of it? Is there? How many pages?
It's about an 8-page agreement, but it's not, that's really not the, we're not going to talk probably about the details of the language, but there's an issue in it I want to describe to you. Legal counsel for the other side in the transaction has said that there's a provision that they'd like deleted. And that provision would give the city the ability to do physical inspections of the property the city's going to receive, which would be typical in a transaction. We can eliminate that, but if we do, we want a little bit of time so that we can go in and check out the property before you actually sign off on the transaction. So I guess our recommendation tonight would be that you agree, you can pass a resolution declaring it surplus, but ask the staff to bring this issue back to you for final authorization once we've had the opportunity to take a look at the property and get it reviewed. Just so you have the protection of knowing what's on that property and what isn't.
We were actually the owners of the property up until 3 years ago.
Right.
Was that? It's still important. I understand.
Yeah.
Since anything was dumped on it or whatever, I understand that, but.
Yeah, we don't have the resolution, so we're not gonna be able to, and it wasn't.
We're just gonna have the public hearing, it wasn't the testimony.
Are they going to adopt the resolution?
Not
Not on
tonight,
the
we
agenda.
can't tonight, because we don't
Well,
have
that
it.
solves my problem.
Okay.
As long as you don't pass the resolution tonight, then we're good. It gives us the time period we need.
Who should inspect it?
We'll hire a consultant to take a look at it.
What would they be looking for?
Looking for evidence of things that shouldn't have been dumped there, or changes in the property that we wouldn't have been aware of over the last 3 years.
There has been an environmental review done on the property, and you have copies of the environmental review on all the parcels. Should I go through?
Go ahead.
There has been a complete, full assessment of the property, an environmental review, and no hazards were noted. The date of that review is less than 1 year old. So I mean, as you said, you own the property unless somebody has gone in there and done something since we had the environmental assessment done. We've also had people crawling around, doing the archaeological review and also doing the soils test, and there was nothing in that. And just for your information, there was nothing negative brought up in that review. So, the other thing is, I think you all know that we're under this time frame to get everything into HUD. And we do have the letter of intent that shows that the city intends to make the property exchange. But we're supposed to have proof that we have site control, by February 11th, and I don't think you're meeting again before that. The letter of intent would that, in the city attorney's opinion, provide evidence of site control?
Well, the letter of intent says it's non-binding, so I doubt that it would. But that, you have to rely on your own legal counsel for that advice. As I understand the recommendation tonight, it would be to continue the proceedings since you've heard the hearing, and then come back at a special meeting to approve the resolution. What would the date of that be?
Well, we were gonna discuss whether to change the next meeting to the 7th, since the first meeting would be on the 14th, which is Valentine's
Valentine's.
Day. So, we were gonna probably discuss that later.
We'll be discussing that later, and we'll probably be moving it up, I would imagine. And if not, we would definitely make a date, or try to make it in time to get her answer so that she can be compliant with her application.
We appreciate it, thank you.
Yes.
So do we close the hearing now, or?
Any other comments? Kevin?
Is it possible, I guess I didn't really quite hear the part that they wanted deleted from the agreement. Is it possible for us to give her the proper, do the exchange, and her still have liability if there is some environmental issue on the property or something that's happened, dumping or contamination or so on and so forth?
Well, that's probably possible. There's clearly something that, since they're represented by council, we'd want to work with their lawyer on.
Okay. And I was just thinking in the interest of time,
Sure.
because that's a pretty short schedule to get someone out here to do an inspection and provide a report to us to consider it, and within what,
2 weeks.
yeah, 2 weeks.
Go ahead, Lance.
If I could just ask a question, you talked about your environmental review, it was done within the last year, and that's encompassing of the entire property, including the acre that's subject to this agreement?
I was out there, digging holes all over.
Well, it does cause, every time you have the whole land use process is getting quite expensive. And, it's probably, for us to do the environmental, was over $4,000, and then it will be an additional for you guys to want to inspect the property. That's an additional expense for somebody, a professional, to come out and inspect the property. I mean,
Can't you just do a walkthrough?
Eva?
Could we use, if they brought the environmental study forward so we could review it, would we make a decision based off that, would you recommend something like that, and if we did a walkthrough?
That may be the solution if there isn't enough time to do something else, may be the best we can do, but at least we ought to make an attempt, is our view, to do something commercially reasonable before you actually close on it.
I would think an environmental study would be.
I don't mind hiking through there, that sounds,
We could even have Sheldon go out and hike through it with us.
You bet.
I mean, I don't know anything about the,
Me either, but I'd be willing to walk through, because I've read everything on this hole and been told by other people everything that she's went through to get this, and I truthfully believe that the council should try to do whatever it takes to make this work within reason, and
Right.
make sure all interested parties are satisfied.
Yeah, our job isn't to try to undermine that, our job is to make it happen, because you want it to happen, we just want
Right.
to try and do that in a prudent way.
No, I understand. I'm just saying that we feel like that we need to make it work.
We understand that, so.
Okay. Any other questions? With that, then, I don't know, at this time, do we need to make a motion to have a group of people go out and inspect that, or what do you think we should do?
Well, I suggest just close the hearing, and then we'll work with the staff to see what we can accomplish in the next
Okay.
couple of weeks, and if that's what we need to do, we'll let you know.
All right. So with that, with no more questions from anyone? Tom?
I'll just say too that I'm good with the environmental impact that they are. I grew up there, so I know that area for 60 years, and nothing's been in there for 60 years, but certainly something could be there before that, but I'd be good with
Environmental.
with their,
Okay.
what they already did.
With that being, then let's adjourn the public hearing on the declared property surplus to be given to the CCHC in exchange for the 1 acre parcel. All right. So, next on the agenda, got there. Comments by the general public on any item of interest that is not going to be discussed on the agenda, committee reports and government officials. I just want to also remind everyone that you're more than welcome to ask us any question that's not on the agenda, and please always address us as a council, because we are a council. So with that being said, I open general public to comments. Would anyone like to comment? Sandra?
Sandra Kelly, Cascade Locks. First of all, I'd like to apologize for going over the top last time I stood at this podium. Particularly in light of everything that's happened in Arizona with the new tone being offered, I think it's important to maintain a new level of respect and decorum, and I want to assure everybody I'm going to do my best to help with that from this point on. And also, I wanted to thank the council very much for your last meeting, your special meeting. I very much appreciate how the issues were laid out and explained to the citizens. I think that is a big help for them to know how you reached the decisions that you reached. And I also think it should be reassuring to citizens to know that the agreement that was reached and agreed to in no way restricts individual citizens from taking action against anybody they consider to be culpable, nor does it protect anybody from what could be considered a criminal action. And for those reasons, I thank you again, all of you. And from there, I would like to make a request, and that would be that I was speaking to Gary Munkoff and other citizens that had a part in bringing forth the initiatives that are now a part of our charter. And also discussing about the attempt to bring the new charter to the citizens during the last election, and the composition of the charter committee. Basically, every single person on that committee none of them were in favor of maintaining the citizens' initiatives or the status quo of the council maintaining the power base in the city instead of a city manager. Those were basically the two issues. I really think that that committee needs to be a more balanced committee, and by adding just a member or two to the committee that already exists is not going to achieve that balance. I also think the city council should consider maybe not approaching an entirely new charter until there seems to be more of a cooperation of minds, because you have two distinct ways of doing business here. One is, I believe, which are the history of our charter. I have all the charters this town's ever had in this book, and the history of the charters clearly shows that the power was meant to be maintained by the council. But there are quite a few citizens who believe that a city manager should be designated that power. And I think that discussion has to go farther before you put citizens to make a new charter. I think that it's going to be opposed by one group or another until there's some kind of middle ground possibly, or maybe not a compromise, but some kind of a way to bring more people onto the same page as far as these two issues go, as far as the protective initiatives and as far as where the power should lie. And so is what my request would be, and the request of Gary and some other citizens, is that this committee be dissolved, and that after the council decides just what mission they want accomplished, they reestablish another committee for that mission. It might be possible that since the electric company is something that needs to legally required be addressed in our charter, that you might want to concentrate on an initiative or an amendment regarding the electric company. That in itself is going to be a very big feat. And maybe the committee should just do that first, do a portion of it at a time. It's just a suggestion, and I hope that you'll discuss it. And my last thing that I want to say is that I would request that there be a more thorough budget process. It has been whittled down from maybe 10 meetings to 2 meetings, and sometimes with the suggestion that it should just be rubber stamped and not even opened. I believe that, trust between staff and council and the citizens, that has to be an all-around circle. It just can't be one way. And they need to trust us to be able to oversee our budget to a certain degree, the same way we need to trust them to handle what the council has decided they need to do. So I would ask for a more thorough process for the budget process. I stood here and at one point said, I don't think this council even knows what's being spent, or how much, or on what. Because it's not scrutinized before the fact, and it's not scrutinized after the fact. And after I left, a council member contradicted me and assured the public that all of these things were scrutinized during the budget process. Well, they're not, but I think that they should be, either that or by council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra. Does anyone else have a public comment? Seeing that, we will close public comment. We go to discussions and declaration of potential conflicts of interest. Does anyone have one? Seeing none, we'll go to the next. Consent of agenda. Approval of minutes. December 27th, 2010 council meeting.
Do all of them together.
Okay. B is approval of minutes of January 3rd meeting, 2011. C is approval of minutes of January 4th, 2011 council meeting. Ratification of bills in the amount of $314,304.08.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved by Tiffany Pruitt and seconded by Kevin Benson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Next, we will go to unfinished business. First item on that is review of pay on on-call paramedic position.
Mr. Mayor, Council.
Okay. I'm sorry, I thought the council talked about it first. Am I not right?
Whatever you would like.
Probably begin with the staff report.
Usually you
Oh, you're going to, I'm sorry, go ahead and give your staff
I
report.
was waiting for you, sir.
No, go ahead.
Real quickly, before I get into the staff report, I'd just like to make a quick comment. This evening I heard somebody talk about trust, and it's something that myself and the fire department have been looking at pretty intensely here for the last couple of weeks, couple of months. And in communicating with people in the public and seeing things on the internet and different places, there obviously seems to be a lack of trust with the fire department and with its department head. And I'd like to extend an olive branch to the council and to the community to ask for their support and their continued support in what we're doing here to provide the best services for the community. There's a lot of stuff that we do that most people don't understand, and I think the best way to build trust or to work on that trust is through communication. And unfortunately, I've been remiss in communicating as well as I could have with the public and the community and council. And I'd like to make a pledge to do a better job of that. And I'm hoping with this new council, we can move forward and make that happen. So, moving on to the staff report. As you see before you, the requested action is continue the paid-on-call paramedic position through the end of this fiscal year. And there's a lot of information in the staff report that was covered, and some of it might be a little confusing. A lot of numbers, a lot of statistics, percentages and whatnot. But what we found is that as a result, a direct result of having the paid-on-call paramedic position, we're not only starting to see an increase in our revenue, but we're also getting the opportunity for staff to catch up on things that we haven't been able to catch up on. Specifically, the ambulance billing, which was pointed out this evening by the auditor. By having the paid-on-call paramedics available for some of the calls during the daytime, or even when we have later responses, it gives staff the ability to catch up on that stuff that we don't have the ability to do so. Looking at specifically at the numbers on the spreadsheet on the back page, not the way back, but the second to the last page, you'll notice that down at the bottom where it says in the little block that talks about total billed, total received, and then projected revenue after expenses. A little bit of where we got this information is we took the 7 interfacility transfers that we did in the 6 months, which is basically July 1st to December 31st, 2010. The 3 of the 7 that you see were not, we haven't received any of the billing on that yet, and that's just because the billing went in about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. So those numbers, that revenue, we won't see for quite some time. I'd say maybe a month or 2 months. But based on that information, when we take into consideration the costs of doing the call, paying our employees, paying for fuel, and then again at the taking into consideration what Councilmember Benson brought up earlier when we were having these discussions about depreciation, we factored depreciation into this as well to make a more reasonable number. Looking at what we're projecting receiving, we're looking at receiving about $7,500. The number says 79 here, but you know, I guess to kind of buffer our numbers a little bit, we'll say 7,500. That's just on 7 interfacility transfers. Now, the total we paid out so far to the paid-on-call paramedics is $5,401. And where the confusion might lie is, well, you know, we're not seeing how the $730.18 that you've estimated on the spreadsheet takes into account the $5,000 that you spent. All I had the time for was to reflect the amount of revenue and expenses on the 7 interfacility transfers. To actually go through and do the numbers on 88 calls, which is what the paid-on-call paramedics completed in that 6 months, would take an incredible amount of time in terms of, you know, factoring out how much was billed, how much we had to spend. So if you look at just the 7 calls and how much we've spent on the paid-on-call paramedic, after we take our projected revenues, we'll have a surplus of $2,000. And that's just over 6 months. Yes, sir.
Okay, so with that being said, one of the other things that I read in your report is that there's a 30% decrease or a 30% margin that we lose because of insurance. So with that being said, you take 30% off of that and that 2,000 just went away.
I'm glad you asked that question. If you look down below that box, we have the average transport bill at $1,989.64. And then we have the expected return at 68%. So that takes into account that 30% and then some, which is what the auditor actually recommended this year. He recommended that we go beyond the 30%. The number that you see for projected revenue after expenses, I'm pretty sure I used the expected return rate at 61%, which is like worst case scenario. That's where we end up with that 7,957. So that actually takes into account that depreciation of 30%.
Okay, so my next question would be then, it took in the depreciation of what the medical companies don't pay, but and this is an unknown item that we have no idea of, is how much money are we gonna lose due to the fact that the billings could possibly go away, like what the auditor was saying, because it's been too long. That's an unknown. I don't know how, I'm sorry, it's very hard to take and grasp on something when it's never billed. You know, and so it's, I'm trying to understand how these numbers, and they're too hypothetical. You should be able to tell me percentage-wise, you know, you have your numbers, and right now, we don't know what the numbers are. And it just doesn't make any sense to me. I can read it all, parts of it make sense, and then parts of it, it's like, how do you, if it's not tangible, if you don't get the money in, it's not tangible, it's not there. It's one thing to have a billable account, but if it's a billable account that's past due for too long and it never gets paid, how do you compensate for that? How do you allow for it? It's an unknown factor. You see what I'm trying to say? So it's very disconcerting to me how you can quote numbers. Gosh. I mean, maybe try to explain it to me, but I'm having a hard time here.
Well, sir, if you look below where it says expected return rate at 61%, our actual collection rate based on 4 of those 7 calls right now is 88%. When you take into the contractual allowances with Medicare and Medicaid, we're being paid the full amount. I think the second call down to Emmanuel Hospital, we billed out at $1,731.25, and we actually received that. So the only outstanding revenue that we have based on those first 4 calls is $661.12. And that's the patient's portion of this particular revenue. In terms of medical billing is not like an electric bill or a Visa bill. The money trickles in over time. And yes, the auditor was correct in saying that the longer you wait on submitting medical bills, there is a chance that you may not be able to collect as much as you would if you get it in a timely fashion. At this point in time, as I stated in the staff report, we're caught up. So the propensity for us to be as delayed as we were in the last fiscal year, I think is almost improbable. If you look at our billing rates that we had from 2006 to 2008, we were bringing in about $80,000 a year. And those averages were fairly consistent. The only reason that we ended up dipping down was because we had a problem in being able to have the amount of time necessary to complete the submittals to the billing company. So while numbers may seem hypothetical, they're based on past occurrences.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have a question?
I think he had his hand up for.
Your box here of the billings and transfers and such, now you said the first 4 represent a collection of over 80%?
Yes, sir.
So the third one down, Kaiser, 65 miles, we billed for $1,856.25. We received $726.41, and we wrote off $1,129. And then the next one down is basically the same thing. We billed $2,000, collected $700, and wrote off $1,363. Now, the statement you just made and this documentation seem to conflict with each other. How is that a collection rate of over 80%?
That's completely understandable. It was really confusing for me when I first started dealing with ambulance revenues back in 2005. When I used to get when I get the reports from Springfield, you know, they would show a collection rate of a number a lot higher than I was able to calculate. According to the accountants and according to the billing companies, regardless of what we bill out, because of the contract that we have in place with Medicare, we are only allowed to bill so much. As a result of that, when we bill out